Why do you keep overthinking things that haven't even happened? Have you ever noticed how your mind can ruin a moment that hasn't even happened yet? You receive a message. Just 2 words. Can we talk? And suddenly, your mind creates an entire movie. Maybe they're angry. Maybe you did something wrong. Maybe they're leaving. Maybe something terrible happened. You don't even know what the conversation is about. But your heart is already racing. Or maybe you're waiting for an important result. An interview. An exam. A relationship. A business opportunity. A decision. And before anything actually happens, you've already imagined the worst possible ending. You lose sleep over conversations that never happened. You cry over situations that don't exist. You become anxious about problems that may never come. And sometimes, you spend an entire day suffering from something that exists only inside your imagination. But here's the strange part. Your mind tells you that overthinking is helping you. It says, think about every possibility. Prepare for the worst. Figure everything out. Don't get surprised. Don't trust too easily. Think again. And again. And again. But eventually, you aren't preparing for life anymore. You're mentally living through disasters that haven't happened. And this is where overthinking becomes dangerous. Because there is a difference between thinking carefully and torturing yourself with possibilities. There is a difference between planning and constantly predicting disaster. There is a difference between being responsible and trying to control a future that doesn't belong to you. Maybe you're watching this because your mind never becomes quiet. You lie down at night, and suddenly your brain becomes louder. You remember something embarrassing you said 5 years ago. You think about tomorrow. Then next month. Then next year. You imagine your future marriage. Your career. Your family. Your money. Your health. Your relationships. You think about what people think of you. You think about what could go wrong. And somehow, a simple night in your room becomes a courtroom where your mind puts your entire life on trial. Why did I say that? What if they misunderstood me? What if I fail? What if I never succeed? What if I choose the wrong career? What if they leave? What if I never get married? What if my dua isn't accepted? What if something happens to my family? What if everything goes wrong? What if? What if? What if? And the worst part, there is no ending. Because every answer creates another question. You solve one imaginary problem, and your mind creates another. You find reassurance, and 5 minutes later, you need reassurance again. You check the message. You reread the conversation. You look at their last scene. You check their story. You search for signs. You ask someone what they think. Then you ask someone else. Then you think about it again. And eventually, you're exhausted. But nothing actually happened. This is one of the biggest problems with overthinking. It can make imagination feel like reality. Your body can react to something that hasn't happened. Your heart can race. Your stomach can hurt. Your sleep can disappear. Your mood can change. Even though the event you're afraid of hasn't happened, your mind doesn't always understand the difference between something happening and you repeatedly imagining it. So you can experience the emotional pain of a future that may never exist. Think about how unfair that is to yourself. You suffer today for a tomorrow that may never come. You lose today's peace because you're afraid of tomorrow's possibilities. And tomorrow arrives only to become another thing you're worried about. This is how people lose years of their lives. Not because something terrible happened every day, but because they were constantly afraid that something terrible might happen. And Islam teaches us something incredibly important here. You are not the owner of tomorrow. You are responsible for today. Allah knows what is coming. You don't. Allah knows what you need. You don't always know. Allah knows what will happen. You don't. And perhaps one of the hardest lessons of faith is accepting that you don't need to know everything. You don't need to know exactly how your story will unfold. You don't need to know who will stay. You don't need to know exactly where your career will go. You don't need to know when your dua will be answered. You don't need to know every detail of your future. You need to trust the one who does. That is where tawakkul becomes real. Tawakkul doesn't mean you stop planning. It doesn't mean you become careless. It doesn't mean you refuse to think about the future. You can plan. You can prepare. You can work hard. You can make decisions carefully. But after doing what is within your control, you have to release what isn't. And that's the part overthinkers struggle with, letting go. You want certainty. You want guarantees. You want to know that everything will be okay. You want to know that nobody will hurt you. You want to know that your career will work. You want to know your relationship will last. You want to know your plans won't fail. But life doesn't give you those guarantees. And perhaps that's why Allah asks us to trust Him. Because if you knew everything that was going to happen, you would never need trust. Faith would be easy. The real test is continuing to walk, even when you cannot see the entire road. Imagine you're driving at night. Your headlights only show you a small part of the road ahead. You can't see 10 kilometers ahead. But you don't stop driving because of that. You keep moving. You trust that the road continues beyond what you can see. Your life is similar. Allah may not show you the entire journey. He may only show you the next step. And sometimes, that's enough. You don't need the entire map. You need the next step. Maybe your next step is studying. Take it. Maybe your next step is applying for the job. Do it. Maybe your next step is apologizing. Apologize. Maybe your next step is leaving something harmful. Leave it. Maybe your next step is making sincere dua. Make it. Maybe your next step is simply getting through today. Then get through today. Stop demanding tomorrow's answers before you've finished today's responsibilities. Because overthinking often comes from wanting control over something we were never given control over. You cannot control what someone thinks of you. You can control how you treat them. You cannot control whether someone stays. You can control whether you maintain your dignity. You cannot control whether an opportunity works out. You can control how much effort you put in. You cannot control the future. You can control what you do today. And that difference is everything. There is another reason we overthink. Fear. But not every fear is a warning. Sometimes fear is simply your mind trying to protect you from uncertainty. Your brain doesn't like not knowing. So it creates stories. If you don't know what someone is thinking, your mind fills in the blank. If you don't know what will happen, your mind imagines the worst. If you don't know whether you'll succeed, your mind predicts failure. Why? Because certainty feels safer. Even if the certainty is negative. Sometimes people would rather believe something terrible is going to happen, than admit they don't know what will happen. But not knowing isn't the same as something being wrong. Read that again in your mind. Not knowing does not mean something bad is happening. Someone taking longer to reply doesn't automatically mean they hate you. Someone being quiet doesn't automatically mean they're angry. One rejection doesn't mean you'll always fail. One bad day doesn't mean your life is going badly. One mistake doesn't define your future. One delay doesn't mean your dua is rejected. Your mind may tell you otherwise, but thoughts are not facts. Just because you thought something, doesn't mean it's true. Just because you imagine something, doesn't mean Allah has written it for you. And just because you feel something, doesn't mean you have to obey it. This is something Gen Z especially needs to understand. We live in a world where information never stops. You can know what everyone is doing, where everyone is going, what everyone bought, who got married, who got promoted, who moved abroad, who started a business, who became successful. And when you constantly see everyone else's lives, your mind starts predicting your own future through comparison. You see someone else's success, and think you're falling behind. You see someone else's relationship, and think you'll always be alone. You see someone's career, and think you'll never achieve anything. But you're comparing their visible outcome to your invisible uncertainty. You don't know what Allah has planned for you. So stop using someone else's life as evidence against your own. Your story is not their story, and your future is not determined by what someone else received. Another major cause of overthinking is regret. The mind loves to go backward. What if I had chosen differently? What if I hadn't trusted them? What if I had taken that opportunity? What if I had said something else? What if I hadn't made that mistake? What if? But here's the problem. You are trying to edit a chapter that has already been written. You cannot go back. You can learn from the past. You can repent. You can apologize. You can improve. But you cannot live there. Sometimes Shaitan uses your past to make you hate your present. He reminds you of every mistake, until you start believing that your mistakes are your identity. They're not. You made mistakes. You are not your mistakes. You failed. You are not a failure. You sinned. You are not beyond forgiveness. You lost something. That doesn't mean your story is over. Allah can bring good from things you thought destroyed you. Sometimes the thing you regret most becomes the reason you grow the most. So don't keep punishing yourself for a past you can no longer change. Learn. Repent. Move forward. And then there is another kind of overthinking. The kind that comes from wanting everything to be perfect. You want the perfect decision. The perfect career. The perfect relationship. The perfect time. The perfect plan. So you keep thinking. Researching. Comparing. Asking. Waiting. Thinking again. And eventually, you make no decision at all. Because you're terrified of making the wrong one. But sometimes, a good decision made with sincere effort is better than a perfect decision that you never make. You don't need to know whether every decision will work. You need to know whether you're making the best decision you can with what you know today. Then trust Allah with the result. That is maturity. You do your part. You ask Allah for guidance. You take the means. And then you accept that the outcome belongs to Him. This doesn't mean every outcome will be easy. Sometimes you will make the right decision and still face difficulty. Sometimes you'll work hard and still fail. Sometimes you'll make dua and still have to wait. But failure doesn't mean Allah wasn't with you. Difficulty doesn't automatically mean you chose wrong. And a closed door doesn't always mean your life is over. Sometimes it simply means, keep walking. There may be another door. Maybe not the one you imagined, but another one. This is why you have to be careful with the sentence, my life is ruined. You don't know that. You are looking at one moment. Allah sees the entire story. You see today. Allah knows tomorrow. You see the closed door. Allah knows what is behind the next one. So don't turn a temporary situation into a permanent conclusion. You are allowed to say, this is difficult. You are allowed to say, I don't understand. You are allowed to cry. You are allowed to feel afraid. But you don't have to conclude, everything will go wrong. That's where you need to stop your mind. Not every thought deserves your attention. Some thoughts need to pass. Let them pass. You don't have to debate every thought. You don't have to solve every possibility. You don't have to investigate every feeling. Sometimes you can simply say, I don't know. And that's okay. Allah knows. That sentence can change your entire relationship with uncertainty. I don't know what will happen. Allah knows. I don't know who will stay. Allah knows. I don't know where my life is going. Allah knows. I don't know whether this door will open. Allah knows. I don't know why this is happening. Allah knows. And I don't need to know everything to trust Him. That is Tawakkul. Now, what can you actually do when overthinking starts? First, stop and identify what is actually happening. Ask yourself, is this a fact, or is this a possibility? If it's a fact, deal with it. If it's only a possibility, don't treat it like reality. Second, ask yourself what is within your control. If there is something you can do, do it. If there is nothing you can do right now, release it. Third, stop feeding the thought. Don't keep rereading the same messages. Don't keep checking someone's profile. Don't keep asking 10 people the same question. Don't keep searching the internet for reassurance. Sometimes reassurance becomes another addiction. You feel anxious. You seek reassurance. You feel better. Then the anxiety returns. So you seek reassurance again. Instead, learn to tolerate uncertainty. Tell yourself, I don't know, and I'm going to be okay with not knowing. Fourth, make dua. Not because dua is a magical way to control the future, but because dua reminds you that you're not carrying the future alone. Tell Allah what you're afraid of. Tell Him what you want. Tell Him what you don't understand. Cry if you need to. Then leave it with Him. And fifth, come back to the present. Look around you. Where are you right now? What do you need to do right now? Not tomorrow. Not next year. Right now. Maybe you need to pray. Maybe you need to study. Maybe you need to work. Maybe you need to sleep. Maybe you need to eat. Maybe you need to apologize. Maybe you need to stop scrolling. Do that. Come back to the life that is actually happening. Because while you're busy worrying about an imaginary future, your real life is passing. And that may be the saddest part of overthinking. You can spend so much time preparing for a future, that you forget to live the present. You can miss today's sunrise because you're afraid of tomorrow's sunset. You can miss a beautiful conversation because you're thinking about what might happen next. You can miss the blessings Allah has already given you, because you're obsessing over the ones you don't have yet. So today, look at your life differently. You don't know what tomorrow holds. But you know what today holds. You have another breath. Another prayer. Another chance. Another opportunity to improve. Another opportunity to make dua. Another opportunity to love someone. Another opportunity to do something meaningful. Don't waste today's blessing worrying about tomorrow's possibility. And if something bad does happen tomorrow, you will deal with tomorrow when it arrives. Allah will give you the strength for the test when the test comes. You don't need today's strength for tomorrow's problem. You need today's strength for today's life. Remember that. You don't have to carry tomorrow today. And perhaps the most beautiful thing you can tell yourself when your mind starts creating disasters is this: if Allah has brought me through everything I've already survived, He will help me through whatever comes next. You have survived things you once thought would destroy you. You have cried over things you eventually recovered from. You have feared endings that eventually became new beginnings. You have experienced moments you thought you couldn't handle, and somehow, you're still here. So trust the one who carried you through yesterday. And trust Him with tomorrow. Maybe tomorrow will be difficult. Maybe it will be beautiful. Maybe something unexpected will happen. Maybe a door will close. Maybe another will open. You don't know. And that's okay. Because you don't need to know. You need to trust. You need to make the effort. You need to make dua. You need to take the next step. And then leave the unseen to the one who knows the unseen. So tonight, when your mind starts asking, what if? What if I fail? What if they leave? What if my future doesn't work out? What if my dua isn't answered? What if everything goes wrong? Pause. Take a breath. And ask yourself, what if everything doesn't go wrong? What if Allah has something you can't see yet? What if the thing you're afraid of never happens? What if the delay is protecting you? What if the closed door redirects you? What if the future you're imagining isn't the future Allah has written? You don't know. And that's the point, you don't know. But Allah knows. So stop suffering for a future that hasn't arrived. Stop turning possibilities into realities. Stop punishing yourself for things that haven't happened. Stop letting your imagination steal the peace Allah gave you today. Plan when you need to plan. Work when you need to work. Repent when you make a mistake. Make dua when you're afraid. Take action when you can. And when you've done everything within your control, let Allah handle the rest. Because your life is not in the hands of your imagination. Your future is not controlled by your fears. Your worth is not determined by what happens tomorrow. And your story is not finished. You are simply living one day at a time, while Allah already knows the entire story. So breathe. Pray. Trust. Take the next step. And let tomorrow come when tomorrow comes. Maybe it will bring exactly what you feared. Maybe it will bring something better than you imagined. Either way, you don't have to live tomorrow today. You only have to live today with Allah.